Hello, everyone. Welcome to National Infrastructures in EOSC, our two-day webinar focusing on how national infrastructures are already working together in EOSC and how they can further this collaboration to push EOSC vision and EOSC implementation. Today, we'll be focusing on leveraging national synergies. We'll hear from a series of presentations on core and horizontal EOSC services. These components are what we'll refer to as KERs, key exploitable results. These will be dealt with separately, and for each, we'll get the national perspective from different actors, as well as the current collaboration and ways forward for potential synergies. After every series of presentations, there'll be time for a Q&A and a discussion panel, but we invite you to ask your questions throughout the sessions via Slido. So we've included the information on the screen here, and we've also included it in the chat, but you can ask a question at any time and we'll make sure that it's raised during the discussion. And with that, I'll hand over to Ilaria Fava of EGI to take us on with the discussion.
Thanks, Alex, for the introduction and welcome, everybody. It's a pleasure that you are here today. And without further ado, I would like to guide you through this first part of the section of the event. That's about the discussion around the EOS core key exploitable result in EOSC. So EOS core is that part of the EOSC that aims at removing the fragmentation and enabling the collaboration between disjointed research communities. So enabling cross-disciplinary collaboration possible. And so because of this, I would like to invite my colleague Diego Scardacci, who is the KER champion for EOS core, to give us a presentation about the EOS core. So Diego, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ilaria. Let me share my screen. Okay. Good morning, everybody. In this short presentation, I'll give you an introduction on the Care 1 of the EOSC Official project, the EOS core. EOSC Official, leveraging the output of past EOSC project, put together all different components, services that were built in the past to create a coherent EOS core. That is the, would say, the ground of EOSC. I put in this slide some basic information to allow you to understand better what is the EOS core. The EOS core is made of services, policies, procedure, and so on, and other support activities that allow EOSC to operate. So EOSC can operate thanks to the components that are the part of the EOS core. And very important, EOS core is the part of the EOSC architecture that enable the EOSC Federation, that allows providers of services for the research in Europe to join with their services EOSC. If you look at the diagram on the right of the screen, you can see that the EOS core is the green box on the bottom of the diagram. The EOS core serves the EOSC exchange, where there are all the different community services and horizontal services that are using EOS core capabilities to proper execute within EOSC. Okay, said this, we need to understand what does EOSC core offer to be, I would say, a so essential component of EOSC. First of all, the EOS core provides a common channels that allows providers, researchers in Europe to share and access a multitude of research services and resources. So this means that to the EOS core, a provider can publish, can onboard, register in EOSC services, research product, whatever it thinks that is relevant, And at the same time, the provider can also access this set of resources that are derived from EOSC that are coming from different providers. If we consider also the user, this would be beneficial for the end users, the researchers, since they will be able to access, to discover and access services and research product from a unique source through common channels. And this would allow to remove the fragmentation of the current offer for the researchers in Europe. In addition, this possibility to share services and research product would facilitate the creation of collaboration between research communities, since having this big place where all the different elements that are used in the European research area to make research that are available will facilitate the creation of collaboration, since a user community, a research community can identify services that are coming from other sectors that can be also relevant for them and vice versa. So in this way, the establishment of collaboration between different user community is much easier. Now, after I gave you, I would say, an overview of what is the EOSC, what the EOSC offer, I'd like to go a bit into the details to describe you how the EOSC is made. So what are the main components of the EOSC? First of all, if you look in the diagram, in the green box of the EOSC, within the EOSC architecture that identifies the EOSC, you see the EOSC is split into subset, the core coordination function and the core technical platform. First of all, I'd like to describe you the core technical platform. The core technical platform is made of the EOSC services. The EOSC services are a set of components that allows researchers to have an homogeneous user experience in EOSC. What does mean that? For example, one key component of the EOSC core technical platform is the resource catalog. In the resource catalog, services and the research product coming from different experience can be described in a similar way using the EOSC profile, so with the same field and so on. So in this way, for the user, it's easy to discover and discover services and understanding what they are offering, since they are described with a common language. Another key services that are part of the core technical platform is the AI. So thanks to the AI Federation, researchers in Europe can access a multitude of services using the same credential. So they should not, I would say, be concerned to register to all the different services that you want to access. Then we have the marketplace and the order management tools that after the user discovers a service in the resource catalog, then the user can access these services through common channels. So regardless who is the provider, the procedure to request the access for a service is the same. Similar things are related to more operational tools like the help desk with the common support channel, the monitoring with a unique dashboard that allow the user to gather information about the quality of the services, and the accounting with the usage of resources. Very important, as I said earlier, the EOSC is the base for the EOSC Federation model. What does it mean that? When a provider that is delivering some services for research is interested to publish their service in EOSC, the provider has to, I would say, integrate its services with the EOSC. This is done through, I would say, clear instructions that are provided in the EOS Core Interoperability Guidelines. The EOS Core Interoperability Guidelines, that are key elements of the EOS Interoperability Framework, describe the procedure that a provider should follow to integrate with one or more services of the EOS Core. For example, for the resource catalog, the EOS Core Interoperability Guidelines for the resource catalog describe how, as a provider, the procedure a provider should follow to register its services in the catalog. The interoperability guidelines for the AI will describe how to join the AI Federation and so on. Another very important concept is that the integration with the core services that is optional for accepting the registration in the resource catalog is also flexible. So a provider can decide to integrate with the core services in different manner. Indeed, each of the interoperability guidelines for the core services foresees different integration options. What does it mean? I can give you a very simple example with the help desk. We have the EOSC help desk, that is a central help desk delivered by EOSC, by EOSC Fusion currently as a part of the core. A provider can decide to integrate with the EOSC help desk, for example, integrating its own help desk with the EOSC help desk. So, for example, a mature community that already has its own help desk can decide, using the interfaces that are described in the interoperability guidelines for the help desk, to connect its own help desk with the EOSC help desk. So, if a user creates a ticket for a service of this provider, this ticket will be automatically propagated from the EOSC help desk to the provider help desk. So in this way, the EOSC user will see as interface for the help desk, the EOSC help desk, while the provider can answer to the user with its own help desk. Instead, in the case we have a less mature community that does not have its own help desk, can decide to use the EOSC help desk as its own help desk, creating a dedicated support unit. And this concept of the integration option is available for all the different core services, and the different integration options are described in the EOS Core Interoperability Guidelines of the related core services. These guidelines are already available. Currently, you can consult them in the EOS Fusion Wiki. The link is in the slide, and soon will be also published in Zenodo when they will become officially part of the EOS Interoperability Framework. I put also in this slide, in the bottom of the slide, some links that are pointing to the documentation for providers to join the EOSC. The first two links are those that are currently operational, where you can already find all the material needed to register your services in EOSC. Anyway, I decided to add an extra link, the third one, that is currently under construction, but is very important since there will be a new documentation that will be much more accurate, that will be published in the coming days, very likely next week. So you can in the future consult this link to have more information on how to integrate the service in EOSC. Then, as I said earlier, in the green box of the EOS Core within the EOSC architecture, we have also a second component that are the core coordination function. The core coordination function are all the process and policies that are needed to operate EOSC, since we having, I would say, the core services is not enough, but we need also the procedure and the policies that can allow us to understand how we can operate all these different services. All these procedural policies are part of the EOSC service management system. That is the the way that would allow us to operate the Eos core services in a professional manner. Within the Eos service management system, you will find all the procedure to operate the Eos core services, but also procedure to onboard the services and the research product in Eos, the security coordination, the coordination of the deployment of the different components that are part of the Eos, and so on. So all these the elements that would allow us to properly operate the Eos core in a professional manner. That's all from my side, and I'm happy to answer any question you'd like to ask.
Thanks so much, Diego. So just a reminder to everybody, in the chat there is a piece of instruction to ask questions through Slido. So please prefer that rather than using the Zoom chat. And if Diego, if that's okay with you, we will answer all the questions after the other two presentations. So I would now like to invite Spiro Satanasius from the Athena Research Center to provide his point of view about the Eos core. And just another request to the audience, please look at these presentations also from your national perspective and think if there's anything that you would like to discuss with the speakers, and I mean on Slido. Thanks.
Okay, so I guess you can see my screen. Good morning, everyone. I'm Spiro Satanasius.
Yes, perfect.
From the Athena Research Center. Now I will give you an introduction on Helix, the Hellenic Data Service, our national infrastructure for data-intensive research, and what is exactly our approach for Eos and especially Eos core. So just to get an understanding of where we come from, I'm going to transfer you back to 2017 when Helix was first formed, and we were in front of a convergent policy landscape with emerging trends and needs like the data economy, like the public sector information reuse, the rise of the industrial data platforms, and of course, from a research level, open access and open science at the Euro policy for scientific output, the need for data management plans and fair data. So our challenge was to devise an infrastructure that can accommodate all these things, all these needs at once. As you can understand, and from a high level overview, our emphasis is on data, because our economic growth, our scientific progress, our prosperity is about sharing, reusing, experimenting, building, and valorizing data, or how we call it, frictionless data. Data I can easily use, reuse, and extract output. Enter Helix, the Hellenic Data Service. So we put data first. It is, if we want to give it a specific definition, an infrastructure for data-intensive research. It supports the full life cycle of scientific data management, processing, sharing, and reuse. It's by design scalable and cloud-based. It has a nationwide horizontal cross-domain coverage. We don't focus on a specific domain and a specific thematic area or priority. All data, all scientists are welcomed. It is also by design low cost, achieving economies of scale in order to maximize ROI, because we do operate, and we will discuss about this, in a narrow fiscal envelope. And we also serve multiple roles about open access, provision of fair data, public data from organizations and governments, as well as operating as an industrial data platform. Now, data alone, as you know, is not enough. So the three basic pillars of Helix is PUBs. So it's a nationwide cross-domain discovery of scientific publications, where essentially what we do is we adapt and localize the open-air services. So low cost, low effort. Data, our emphasis. It is a data catalog and repository for fair scientific and industrial data, with users able to discover, collect, and value, download, use them. And what we call Helix Labs. So this is a generic purpose as well as domain-specific collection of services and APIs for anything that has to do with data, analysis, processing, visualization, experimentation. Our target groups as an infrastructure are obviously scientists across all scientific fields, including citizen scientists, organizations in Greece, because we do provide institution-wide services, augmenting or replacing sometimes existing data catalogs, repositories, so it's academia, R&I organizations, even the public sector. Other scientific infra, because Helix also offered services as a building block. So we do provide data processing services in other RIs, as well as towards the industry and innovators, anyone that wants to build a value-added service, discover data based on our offerings. Now, again, the three pillars on a high level is pubs, data, and lab, and we'll briefly go through them. This is the landing page, so in one place users can search and find data, pubs, and Jupyter notebooks, for example, right? With their own personal profile, collections, standard things. Now, publications, as you can see, we have a homogenized UX. So this is how a user can search for publications, organize them, see metadata, download them, etc. Helix data, same view. The user can view, find, and use open scientific data. Again, pretty basic stuff as you'd find in any data catalog and repository, with the metadata, with embargo periods, with access by request, collection of resources. And finally, Helix Lab, where essentially what we do provide is a managed and scalable Jupyter Lab deployment that has access to all published data in Helix and a series of other offerings, for example, the organization of undergrad, postgrad labs for machine learning, for data science within Helix, and access to several other, for example, big data frameworks, HPC systems. So, with that being said, and a brief introduction about Helix, I want you to, before going through how we approach and how we deal with EOS and EOS Core, it is important for you to understand our own viewpoint. So, we have significant technical, not financial, in terms of being lending and owning money, but we do have significant technical debt. And because of the available funding was limited, so multiple design, development, and ops decisions were dictated by that funding. So we needed to prioritize, put our users first, and make sure we deliver the product, we do consider it as a product, that covers the needs with as much as low effort and cost as possible. For example, the publication aggregation is done directly from OpenAir. There was no need to reinvent the wheel, so we just took it and reused it. We harvest from any existing de facto and de jure catalog services data via an extensible harvesting framework. And it is important because we have not asked from any user, any thematic RI, any community to adapt to us. It always goes the other way around. We adapt to them. Obviously, we do have standardized metadata schema, data site based, but we acknowledge and embrace all the heterogeneity of all the existing metadata schemas across scientific fields and do not throw anything away. What this means is that we have automatic transformations and alignments from any existing schema via an extensible framework to our own schema, so the catalog works as intended and fine. And we do maintain, keep, and analyze the original metadata schemata if available, and leverage them to provide a more intelligent serve, recommendation, or any domain-specific service. Moving on, we do not enforce specific data schemas, right? We do not ask from the data to follow a specific schema, do a different thing, but we do acknowledge and provide for specific data schemas, for example, from the geospatial sector and the Inspire Directive or some other, we treat them as first-class citizens. So we can provide for them automated metadata, that is data profiling essentially, visualization, or availability in specific value-added services. So this acts as an incentive to the owner to standardize the data schema because it increases the value and the visibility. The catalog and the repository, the Helix core, as we call it, is packaged and is available for any institutional and thematic repositories to be deployed and operated with out-of-the-box federation with Helix. So it's provided as a turnkey solution. And we also offer it as a white labeled application. So if an organization wants to essentially provide the same functionality, but with its own logos, yeah, that's also doable. Of course, it has everything that the standard Helix has, one-click harvesting, DOI provision, the lot. All published data in the repo are also available in the spaces of our users' Jupyter Lab environments, and also notebooks, scientific output created or executed within Helix Lab is treated as first-class citizen. So this means we also have a catalog where users can search for other notebooks, find, reuse them, and stuff. Finally, our own AAI solution is based on the National Institutional Federation, makes sense, plus ORCID, Google, GitHub, and stuff. So, and this is the end of the presentation, and where we give our own viewpoint of how we treat EOSC future. So, EOSC core. So why we joined this effort, why we want to be part of EOSC? First of all, it makes sense because we want to make our data, the data and the services available in Helix, those created by Greek scientists, and make them discoverable across EU. So, and the world. So we believe that this serves our own users because it increases the value and the reach of their output. It makes sense, right? But, and this is where it becomes interesting, we do not aim to expand our user base outside Greece. It's not that we provide a service that we emphasize Italian or Spanish scientists coming, right, to use. It's not our ambition, right? It's not our goal, it's not our mandate, or something that we can support given our current resources. We have the specific context and envelope in which we operate on. And the third reason of what we joined this effort is that we want to see EOSC significantly lowering the effort and the entry barrier for national RIs. We need to always have in mind that all national RIs, thematic RIs, obviously have specific limited resources and they prioritize what they are going to do over the next years. It makes sense that they will prioritize the needs of their own users versus something external to their own target group. So if the cost-benefit analysis we do all the time about where we contribute and why, it is going to be improved if the effort to be a part of EOSC and maintain a part of EOSC remains low. So our approach now for the EOSC core components, based on what we've seen in the public document, public-facing documents, and what we can see. So about the AAI, yes, obviously it makes sense, and this is something relatively easy to achieve. So embrace EOSC's AAI. About the resource catalog, this is where we have our own problems. We feel that it needs to be simplified. We feel that the motto should be come as you are, right? So give me, show me a catalog service with whatever metadata you are, and let me, EOS, right, make sense of them. About the common access channels, same thing. Make it simpler and faster. What we see right now, again, we are mostly a data infrastructure with publications and notebooks and stuff, but what we can see in terms of the process and the metadata and the rules It's that it's mostly suited for cloud computing, compute, storage service provider, what we would call the standard cloud, rather than a catalog repository for data, right? About the monitoring, again, based on what we've seen, there is limited use applicability for us, meaning that what we gain or what we understand that we can gain doesn't seem enough to justify the effort to adopt it. We have a very stronger view about accounting based on what we've seen so far. It doesn't seem mature enough to be used. And same thing goes for the ordered management. It's not something that is really transferable and makes sense for our own kind of infrastructure. And about the help desk, maybe if it reaches to a point where it actually does serve our internal operations. And that's it from me. Thank you for your time.
Thanks a lot, Spiros. That was really, really interesting, and I believe there are questions for for you in the chat for later. So now I'm glad to give the floor to Professor Ludek Matiska from the Masaryk University. So let me share my screen so that you can see his presentation. And Ludek, I think you can start.
Yep. Good morning to everyone. Thank you for welcoming here me to this webinar. And I must admit that my presentation in many aspects follows the same scope and say subjects as the previous one, because I will speak about the EOSC implementation in Czechia, and I will again focus, like the Greek presentation, on the more wide scope before going to some details. So please, next slide. What we have at this moment within the Czech Republic, we have a document which is called Architecture of EOSC Implementation in Czech Republic, which was prepared during the spring last year, and it was accepted by the ministry in June 2021 and then approved at the end of the year by the special EOSC coordination board for the Czech Republic. The architecture of EOSC implementation focuses on the data management aspects as the core of EOSC and open science, which again is similar to my previous presentation. And the EOSC, for our purposes, at the national level, is understood as a federation of fair data and related services, which means that we are looking for the data as the key element. It is really a data-centric approach. And then we expect that the services will be so extensive and so, say, heterogeneous that we don't want to deal with them at the first level, because we are afraid that this will in fact slow down the whole process. That if we create a valid background, then all these things will emerge more or less naturally, and that there is no such needs to actually coordinate these activities, while it is very important to provide a coordinated approach toward the data-oriented core. And here we see a very key participation of the national large research infrastructure, E-Infra-CZ. We have only one within our country, and it encompasses everything starting from a network up to the high performance computing, including also federated approaches. But we don't expect that this large research infrastructure will be the only subject to build the EOSC in the country. But we consider it, and the ministry considers us, as the key coordination and kind of a supervising or overseeing body within the country. We are lucky in our country because there was already a decision to support this EOSC implementation at the country level with a budget of almost 120 million euros for the next 6 years. And the first call is already out. The second is under preparation, and there will be more calls during the next few years to actually support activities which goes to the EOSC implementation, and this data-oriented EOSC implementation according to the architecture mentioned above. And our way toward the EOSC is through national data infrastructure, which is a complex system which has the following aims: to build the actual infrastructure, the capacity to store the data, to provide a set of key and other services naturally aligned with what is developed or at least thought about at the EU level, and to provide interaction with the processing resources, the HPC clouds as the analytical tools, and so on. The point here is that we are also taking care of the human resources as the key element. So the whole intervention at the national level will also include, say, training and education support, not only for special positions, say, of data curators, data scientists, but also to introduce the dealing with the fair data into the classical curricula of scientists across the universities, to make sure that the people are aware and also knowledgeable, at least at the basic level, when they when they are participating in research. So data-centric. Next slide. Oh, last thing, what I didn't, but it can be both. The point is that we are not building this whole thing on the green field. So we know that there are already repositories. Some of them may be fair, some of them may not. So the whole approach is also to somehow include these and support their evolution toward the fully fair data repositories. Being part of the national data infrastructure means that you are one of the key, or one of the key 4 elements. The metadata directory, you have heard already what we can expect from the metadata, and we have very similar approach here. The national repository platform, the thematic repositories, to include things which already exist or where the independent individual plans for the repositories is already underway. And as I said, education and training. Next slide. So just to say a little bit about the National Metadata Catalog, or Metadata Catalog, is a key component which guarantees findability and interoperability of all the data. And this is the key point where we expect to have the basic information about all the data which are kind of produced or properly processed within the country frame. And the point is that we have an idea of the hierarchical metadata directory, which means that at the top level, we will ask only for the common data, common metadata, and allowing the specific scientific domain to keep and evolve and develop their own metadata schemes. Again, as in the previous presentation, we will be pushing to standardization, but not enforcing it. We will only recommend it and help to setting up, but we will not, in fact, we don't think to influence the way how the individual scientific domains are developing their own metadata, their own ontologies, but we will have this metadata catalog at the top level to actually connect them and to allow findability of all the data, and also starting through the metadata at the country level without actually imposing any specific metadata structure. Then we will have the National Repository Platform, which is the key element to serve as a hub where most of the services will be developed, and it will also include the actual technical capacity to store the data. The idea is that the individual repositories will be built as the virtual tenants on top of this repository platform, allowing institutions, research collaborations, research teams to actually set up specific repositories to be able to, say, govern them, to present their own specific requirements, while the repository platform will enforce some joint mutually agreed conditions. And one key thing, all the data stored here will be connected through the National Metadata Catalog to the findability layer of the whole national data infrastructure. If you go to the next slide, we will see the human resources as a horizontal activity going there, and they're mentioning the existing thematic repositories, because we don't expect that we will move everything to the national repository platform, but that these thematic repositories will be evolving and existing in parallel, but fulfilling the same standards, providing the access or providing data to the national metadata catalog, and also being connected through the same set of basic services, which will be evolved around the national repository platform. And we also have a special interest in the sensitive data because we have quite a lot of people doing the medical, but not only medical oriented research. So the dealing with this thing is important for the national environment. So the point here is that all these things will be somehow, next slide, please. Yeah, what we did as a preparatory steps, we created an open platform countrywide with currently 12 working groups. We have 2 foundation working groups on the metadata architecture, core services, and education, which are already mentioned when I presented the key elements of the national data infrastructure. And then we have 7+1 thematic working groups, the next slide, which goes from bio, health, food, up to the social sciences, humanities, and art. And the +1 is the sensitive data. Here you see the research infrastructures which are behind them, with 2 exceptions, because there are no explicit research infrastructure there, and it is more institutional or cross-institutional activity. And we are asking all these research groups not to stay closed within one research infrastructure, but in fact to cover the whole area and include the others. But the infrastructures mentioned here are those who are leading these activities. And as you see from this list, we are trying to cover really all the scientific domains, leaving no one out, and allowing them to participate in both the definition of these services and also in the next steps when the funding will come into play, to also allow us to, or allow them to be actively involved and to be financially supported to do the contribution to the EOS. If you go to the next slide, we will get to the general principles. This is like, as I said, we believe the data-centric approach is the core of the next generation federated compute and data infrastructures, which means that everything what we will try to build will not be built as a single institution or single research infrastructure activity, but will be based on a close collaboration across all the domains, all the research infrastructures, and most of the, say, active institutions in the open science area within the country. So the collaboration is the key principle. The data-centric is the one, and the partnership and collaboration is our second principle for building EOS. And last but not least, the international dimension. So that the role of the Eos Association, the members of the Eos Association in this role, some of them are already leading the working groups. The next slide. Is steps for 2023. We currently, as I said, the first course are out. We expect that the first 2 projects, the EOSCZ and CARDS, will be dealt with. What we will do there is setting up the EOSCZ secretariat. And if you remember the diagram mentioned by Diego at the beginning, this is kind of the core EOS core coordination role to actually include services like monitoring, accounting on the whole infrastructure. And there we see a key role of this national metadata catalog to actually gives us a key position through these 2 projects to have an overview of what's going on, because all the data, this will be mandatory, all the data in all the repositories in the national data infrastructure will have an element here, we have an item here, and through this we will be able to do at least some basic accounting. At this moment, I can't say how much we will be able to use this technical gap mentioned in the previous presentation, because this is still things under discussion, how much of the current say implementation and developed tools of the EOS core at the EU level we will adopt, or whether we will try to say do our own setup or modifications based on what we already have at the national level. Definitely we would like to lesser the actual new development as much as possible. We will have the national metadata catalog implementation there. And then for the 2023, we expect to submit, and get approved the project for this national repository platform to get the other services. The key ones are the AI, this is the EOS core technical services, and few of the EOS Exchange already being available there to actually allow hooks for the next step, which will be the support for the thematic repositories to be joined, to be connected to the national repository platform. And that's what is the plan for the next year. So we are working last slide. We are trying, we see the EOSC implementation as an opportunity to evolve toward the open science principles. We evolve from the compute oriented to the data centric focus. We see this as a partnership, and we are trying to look at the offers at the EOS core, and we naturally, as you had seen, many things are very similar to what the Greece is preparing. So I say that this is the reflection of what is going on at the EU level, but at this moment I can't say how much of the EU prepared stuff will be actually used directly, or whether we will be just connecting and using interfaces of these core services at the EU level to actually provide their extension at the national level. And last but not least, we have secured funding till 2028, so we think that we will be able to actually implement all these things in the first coming years. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I was muted, but thank you, Ludek. That was really enlightening about the situation in Czech Republic. We have one last speaker for this session. Tommy, are you here with us?
Hello?
Hi, hello.
Sorry, I'm currently driving in the car.
Oh.
Sorry, I was away for some days due to illness in the family, so I just managed to come here. But I have not prepared a presentation.
No, that's not a problem. Thanks for being with us.
All right.
If you want to say some words, we would be happy to hear them.
And this was from the perspective of the Finnish national research infrastructures, or?
Yes.
All right. Well, I was listening to the previous presentation here, and the Finnish landscape is also with regard to research data, so that there are quite a lot of disciplinary international initiatives that the organizations participating. So, for example, there is this ICOS or INAR on the climate and on the biodiversity observations. There are on the genetics and the medical side, there are a lot of disciplinary but international or global initiatives that they directly participate in. We have also a national research data hub where data is collected from different sources, and while it harvests some of the it works as an aggregator nationally, but quite a lot of the data sets come directly there. So it works as a collection hub for research infrastructures for those disciplines that don't have their own organized disciplinary repositories or systems in place. So then when I look at the situation on the European level, those that already collaborate internationally or globally within their disciplines are actually, I think, harder to kind of onboard, because they have their established metadata schemas and are able to share data globally within their discipline. But then for those actors that have national data repositories, their potential for this kind of EOS facilitated European integration is, I think, much higher. But then also thinking about this interdisciplinary use of research data sets, that's of course something that is potentially the European level integration via EOS would actually be able to also benefit. Not sure how we can on the national level, we're not able to attract those actors who participate in global aggregation. That's disciplinary already. But as they feel that they have kind of already this integration implemented.
Okay, thank you. There might be questions for you in the Q&A. So if we are okay with that, I would kindly ask Alex to. Okay, thanks. So there are a few questions in the chat. The first one is for Diego. If any provider takes the EOSC help desk, should the provider obey to the EOSC rules and SMS policies to manage the tickets, or provider can keep using their own rules?
No, there is no, I would say, any request to obey specific procedure from EOSC. The technology is delivered for the community that can implement their own process. The key point, I think, is only to have operational rules that guarantee, that are declared, and then can guarantee decent level of quality. So in general, what EOSC is offering is the channel, the possibility to use the technology, but you can keep your own policies and rules to manage the tickets in the short.
Okay, thank you. And there's another question for you very briefly. Are there common issues for providers in applying the interoperability guidelines? As far as you know.
Yeah, this question is quite generic. I think it depends service by service. But in general, for what I have, there are no major issue. As EOSC Future, we are funded to support providers that are integrated with the core services. So this is, I would say, is not a part that will, it's not a work that you have to do alone, but also with expertise coming from the people that are operating the core services. In general, in the interoperability guidelines, there are, as I said during my presentation, different options with different level of integration, and this can also allow you to choose the option that best fit your needs in terms of both technical requirement and cost, since different integration options can also imply a bigger or smaller cost in terms of effort to perform the integration.
Okay, thank you so much, Diego. Now there's a question for Spiros. Is Helix Lab similar to a virtual desktop infrastructure for Windows desktops? I like to provide our students with an individual desktop for lab practicals.
No, but it's actually on a roadmap. So Helix Lab, it's at its core a Jupyter Lab environment managed, right, as you would execute Jupyter notebooks. VDIs are something lots of users are requesting, but we don't have the computing resources to provide them right now. So we know there is a need, but not right now.
Okay, thanks. So I'll skip this question. We might address this later. And a question for Ludek. How difficult was it to gain the funding at the national level to support the implementation? Oh, okay. So
sorry,
can you? So that's okay.
What was it? Yeah. How difficult was to gain the funding?
Yes, exactly.
I mean, we were fortunate. I must admit, it was not so difficult because it was part of the negotiation between the Czech Republic and the Commission on the structural funds. And the Czech Republic got kind of a clear hints that the EOSC support is expected to be, the structural funds are expected to be used for also EOSC implementation at the national level. So at the end, the more difficult question was, it was a kind of a political decision that they will allocate these 120 million euros for the open science EOSC implementation. And then even, in fact, in our case, they only after that decision, they approached the community and us, asking us, okay, and now tell us how to best use this money. So it was a little bit.
Yeah, well, a good
special.
Coincidence. Yeah, thanks, but thanks. That's useful. I mean, to know that these kind of things can happen. And then there's a question there's time for just one question that's addressed to all of you as national representatives. So in setting national infrastructures, what would be the priorities related to the EOS core components? Do you have any wish lists on EOS future delivery and how to interact with it? If you want to start, Spiros, Ludek, or Tommy, or if you have anything relevant to say here.
It's really early to say.
Okay.
Why it's early to say? We haven't seen EOSC actually materialize, right? What we can see right now, yes, it's a portal. I can find services, but still, it doesn't seem that I can easily find data, which is my concern, right? So when we see something like this from EOSC, then we will know exactly our positioning in it and our own requirements. But the basic things, at least from my perspective, are make it simpler, easier, faster to join EOSC and provide our resources to EOSC with just limited adjustment and changes from our side as possible.
Okay, thank you.
I agree. What I will add is that let's split the EOS core as the list of services and the implementation of these services, because we, and I'm pretty sure that my colleagues as well, or directly or indirectly, we participate in the definition. We participated and we are still, say, closely related in the definition of what the EOS core services should be. And this is also things which we used for the national, say, projection there. And there I think it's nice, and the set of the core services as defined is fine from my perspective. However, when we are speaking about the technical aspects and the implementation, as I said, and I fully agree with Spiros, we are not there yet. And what we see at the implementation are still more pilots and demonstrations, but not production service. And without that, and for the national decision, we look for the production service, not for yet another set of pilots. We are kind of, say, bored by the pilots, or we don't want to have any pilots. We need a decision. Okay, if someone will say, we will run the help desk and you can guarantee that we will do it and we will solve all the issue, we will definitely be willing to work with them. But if someone will say, okay, we are setting up as a new pilot help desk or pilot AI or pilot anything to try new features, we say we are not interested for the production level.
Okay, thank you. Tommy, do you want to add anything here?
Yes, sorry about the navigator talking in the background. So I'm working in the FAIR core for EOSC, which is actually developing quite a few new core components, and they exactly facilitate data integration and interoperability of data. But to kind of respond to Spiros, if you want interoperability with data, that kind of implicitly also means that we have to do much more work in mapping the schemas of different data sources to each other. And actually, that contrarily, that increases the kind of onboarding effort that is needed. If you want to have data interoperability, you need to map the different schemas to each other to actually create that possibility to combine data from different sources. And as to actual requirements for the core components, not really at the moment. We are actually in the process of developing new things that we can then utilize for the improving the interoperability. And I'll leave it at that.
Thanks. So Diego raised his hand. This is the last contribution for this session. So Diego, please.
Thank you, Ilaria. I'd like to quickly answer to the comment from Spiros and Ludek about the data. We are deploying in these days a new big release of the Eos platform. And in this release, we'll have also data in addition to services. So by the end of this week, will be available a new instance of the Eos marketplace that would allow to discover services and research product, including dataset, publication, and so on. This will be the first official release, and then it's something that you can start to use and understanding if it fits with your need, and we can further improve it according to the feedback that we will receive. For the points raised by Ludek, I agree. We should not talk anymore about prototypes, but we should talk about professional services. This is what we are trying to do within Eos Fission, developing, I would say, an overall system that is operated in a professional manner according to the Eos SMS. This new release that is coming out in these days can be a first answer to Ludek's request, and you will see a quite comprehensive documentation will be available that would allow the providers and national infrastructure to understand the offer, and the services will be the new instance, the new release of the services will be operated, I would say, at operational level. So this may also answer this release that's coming out, may also answer to Ludek's comment.
Thank you, Diego. Thanks to all the speakers of this first part of the webinar. Now it's time to move to the next part. So thank you very much, everybody, for staying here with us until now.
Thank you, Ian. Now, would you like to launch the discussion on the EOSC exchange?
Yeah, good morning. Let me just share my screen. Okay, I assume you can see that. So I'm going to give a brief introduction and overview of the EOSC exchange, which is complementary and integrated with the core services that Diego talked about. Okay, so the exchange itself, the idea here is that this is a place where people can share resources, outputs, research outputs, and so on. So the exchange consists of a catalog and a marketplace which allow you to publish and search and look for this. So the catalog infrastructure itself is part of the core, but the contents of the catalog and the marketplace are really what the exchange is. And this provides a set of resources that allow us to store, preserve, exploit fair data, and most importantly, encourage its reuse. It consists of a number of different pieces from different layers, and I'll talk about those on the next slide. So the exchange, as I said, consists of the catalog and a marketplace. It includes resources from a variety of sources, from the science clusters, thematic inputs, from the regional projects, and also from the so-called horizontal EOS projects. But it's not limited to those. The input could come from almost any place. So at the moment, it consists of resources which are being onboarded from the science clusters, other research infrastructures, other research communities, research projects, existing services from the e-infrastructures, potentially from industry, but also commercial services. And it provides a marketplace which serves the needs of other research communities, and it can be broadened out to the general public and eventually to the private sector. So the onboarding process, which the process itself is a part of the core, includes compliance with the EOS rules of participation. So there's inclusion criteria which have been developed within the EOS Future project. So I think that the sort of bottom line here is the exchange provides the opportunity for science communities to expose and share all of their expertise, the software, the tools, the services that they've developed and used over many years, and allow those to benefit other communities, to be the subject of larger scale collaborations, and with the potential for a much broader exploitation, as well as the infrastructures which can provide more generic horizontal services, which are widely required in the scientific community. And I think one of the differences between the core and the exchange is the core is a set of services which probably in the end most people will need or use, whereas the exchange is an offering from other communities, but it's also, you know, something to maybe save people time. If they're looking to do a certain function, they can go and look and see if something is already existing, maybe adapt that or collaborate with the developers of that and make more use of it. So what's in it? It's really a number of different things which you saw as the layers in the diagram. So there are horizontal services from the e-infrastructures operated for the user communities. There are procured services, for example, for compute and storage from the so-called EOSC 07 projects or other commercial services. All of these should be free at the point of use. And I think that probably the most interesting is services from the science communities, which may be operated on behalf of the broad EOS community. And I'll come back to this in a second. Potentially services from regional projects or the wider community operated for EOS. And I think the biggest thing is the marketplace of software and resources. So research infrastructures can take and use what's in there to run a service for themselves or to use the resources which are provided here. Now, I think we have to be careful about when we say services what we mean, because there is software which can be operated as a service, and there are operational services which are not the same thing. So I may be running a service for my community. I put it in the exchange as a set of software which make up that service, but I'm not necessarily offering to run it for somebody else. At some point, one of my institutes may respond to a tender and say, I'd be happy to run that service on behalf of a broader community, which is not the same thing. So I think we have to be careful that things which go into the exchange are not necessarily operational services, but they are things which could become services. And I think if there's enough interest, there could be common services. But I think that's one of the things which I think we have to be more clear about, and we have to understand what the funding is and how that will be done in the future. And thematic services from the research infrastructures can move into the exchange layer. And I think this is probably one of the most interesting pieces of this. What the status at the moment is currently the project is busy onboarding research resources from the research cluster project. So when I say resources, I mean outputs of research, which can be software, it can be data, it can be many other things. It's onboarding them from the research cluster projects, from other research infrastructures and the research communities, but also from the e-infrastructures and the private sector. And we are in the middle of the first procurements of horizontal resources through the EOSC 07 projects. I think there are a number of things which have to be clarified in the way this would run, and so there's a number of next steps. We have to understand the best way to expose the resources which are contained in the catalogs which are being onboarded. We have to really think about how to make things properly findable. I think today, if you look at the EOS catalog, it's not so obvious how you find what you need. We need to understand the best mechanisms for users to request access to resources and how to account for the use of those. I think we have to implement appropriate mechanisms for support for the use of those resources. And we really need to understand what the long-term funding model for this kind of service will be, because I think people will shy away from it unless they understand how this is going to operate in the long term. And then there, I think it's not just up to the EOS Future project. I think this is input we need from the Commission and from other places. We have to, I mean, there's certainly work that needs to be done in how to integrate the onboarded services with the EOS core and address the usability and of the software and services through the portal, understand how they can be adapted to new user needs, identify how they can be supported between the providers and the users. So I think there's a lot of work to be done once these things have been onboarded to make this a smooth experience. And that, of course, includes operating these catalogs in production with systematic and documented procedures. So just to summarize, I think the exchange will enable a very wide range of research expertise and resources to be discovered, ordered, and shared across the research community. And this will encourage reuse and maximize the value of existing investments. The exchange can be really an enabler for open science because it encourages wider exploitation and reuse of resources, more fully realizing the potential of the existing outputs. And I think done correctly, this is important for the sustainability of EOS because this will and does provide added value to the research communities. And in doing that, I think it brings users into the EOS. So I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian. I think I'm picking up from your talk. I believe that because we are a bit late, we go directly into the other presentations and then we take all the questions at the end. So I remind all the people connected to use the Slido for the questions. So the next speaker comes from Greece. Her name is Evangelia Krisina from the Instruct RI. So Evangelia, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Just to start the presentation. You can see my screen now, right?
Yes, yes, perfect.
Okay. First, I would like to thank you. I'm very happy that I'm with you today and have the opportunity to give you some insight from the structural biology perspective regarding the Eos future. So just to tell you a few things about our research infrastructure, it is a distributed research infrastructure with emphasis mainly on structural biology and services provided to our users. And we have also some services on drug screen efforts and drug target functional characterization. We have nodes all over Greece, and we are affiliated to the ESFRI landmark Instruct. So as an infrastructure, obviously, we have the targeted users that they come not only from the academic and research organizations, but also by industries, private sector, and also we have the aim to reach the young scientists and also to have interdisciplinary applications, which is most important with the discussion that I have already heard going on in Eos Future. The services we provide are shown here, but most importantly is for us the cross-disciplinary applications in collaboration with other research infrastructures at national level, which are also affiliated to ESFRI ones. So we are focusing on proteins in 3 dimensions in order to understand how they function and in order to be able to regulate them or understand how they're regulated and design, for example, specific drugs for those protein targets. The data that we derive, because actually we are both data creators and we are also provide services to users that want to use our data and benefit as well from the different data that they are available in different repositories at present. So an example is, for example, the data derived by X-ray sources. We can have either in-house or synchrotron radiation sources. The amount of data that is produced by this type of experimental work is huge. So we do face challenges also at a national level or as a research organization, how we're going to handle this data. And of course, these challenges are scaled up if it is to go to large scale facilities. And you can imagine the amount of data that is produced through these facilities when users access. Of course, the increase in the different automated approaches and procedures have already, has already led to a lot more data that we need to handle, even for providing access to users remotely and generating images of their samples when they crystallize before we determine their three-dimensional structure, or we have different robotic facilities in order to handle our experimental work. In that respect, at every stage, we need to somehow define ourselves first, what kind of data we are going to consider as most important regarding the services that we provide to users, the extent of the interoperability that we want our data to have and how findable we want these data to be to external or even internal users, if we could differentiate. And for that, there should be an interaction with EOSC in order to be able to set the requirements and understand what is best to avoid actually having fragmentation of our efforts, or if it is to design something in the first place, to be able to do that correctly. In fact, we have been as a community, out of the oldest communities that started talking about open data with Protein Data Bank that was established back in 1970s. So it has been already 50 years that we have been depositing the results of our work in an open access database. Now, in terms of putting together the services that we provide and the research infrastructure that we have in collaboration with Athena Research Center, who is actually a partner of our research infrastructure, we have put together a catalog that lists our services to users. It's open, it's accessible by different external and internal users, and through that we have also implemented the access policy for different scientists or industries that want really to use our services. The model that was used for that purpose was really based on countries in order to design and implement this catalog of services, equipment, and expertise for offered by the Inspired Arise. So it was absolutely essential to have access to EOS core technologies as users and also as beneficiaries and service providers as well for the future. When it comes now to the services provided, it is, and I will use something that was said by the previous user, it's very important to try to find common ground and try actually to make the data interoperable and be able to understand what are the opportunities for innovation. So if it is possible to use and integrate what is available at different research infrastructures at the moment in terms of services and opportunities, then a user might have, let's say, one stop, and then from that stop can really understand what is available in more than one research infrastructures. I'm not quite sure how this would be possible to implement, but I believe that people involved in EOSC could really be the ones that could offer these kind of opportunities to different users and service providers. So we need to develop a crosstalk between ESFRI projects, and this could go down to national communities, national research infrastructures offering services and vice versa. If it comes now with on structural biology and giving more emphasis on what we're doing, as I mentioned, it's Protein Data Bank that has been now more than 50 years providing open access to different structural biologists. We have Research Data Alliance, and there were different initiatives from the Greek and also from other communities like Italy, for example, that coordinated a group in RDA. Of course, in Instruct and ESFRI projects in collaboration with the different actually cross-disciplinary thematic areas, they try to find a common ground for development. And of course, it is open air that also at national level, we have made the most in order to be able to promote our results in terms of publications and not only. So for us, it is, as a community, we have already been using, for example, universal data format for the crystallographic information that has been produced for protein structures. But this is important to expand to other data that we are going to produce and we want to see deposited or be findable by other users in different repositories. So maybe another or additional universal format is going to be applied or is going to be, let's say, prescribed if it is to treat our data in a more useful way. Now, in terms of the future goals about EOSC, at least from the perspective of the National Research Infrastructure for Structural Biology, it would be nice to see a vocabulary that would be developed specifically for the 3D communities and the people that they are also key stakeholders or boundary spanners and would like really to see what is in the different fields and benefit for what structural biology has to offer. So in that respect, for example, we have already started collaboration at national level with the structural biology community and Elixir community, and it would be nice if this could expand as well in Europe. And also it would be important to perform something like a SWOT analysis and see what has been achieved so far, what are the challenges, just to see what is already available and avoid reinventing the wheel for some at least of the work that has already been performed. Just to show you an example, for example, from OpenAIR that has already taken care of preparing a dashboard for our national research infrastructure. It's still at its infancy, let's say, but we expect to enrich that with our material. And for the moment, what is offered is different products that they are related to publications, data, protein structures deposited with Protein Data Bank, and other research products. So in collaboration with Athena as well, we have been planning for the future to provide training to our community in order to be able to make the most of the tools that OpenAIR has developed by actually exploiting the OpenAIR National Open Access Desk and tools like Argos for data management, data infrastructure design. So to conclude, it's nowadays we need to work on systems. So it's not enough to see just one protein structure in 3 dimensions. We saw all the example of coronavirus and what it was required in order to be able to have all the knowledge and data available and expertise to have some results and useful results very fast. So it is absolutely essential to collaborate and be able to find useful information and convert that to knowledge. So we believe that if it is for us to bring structural biology at the forefront of research and keep helping people recognize the role it plays in understanding the mechanisms of life, we definitely need to see all the developments that EOSC future plans to have and also to collaborate and contribute if possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Evangelia. So as well as for you, we take all the questions at the end and we go now to the last speaker, that is Roxana Wilk from CipherNet.
Hello, thank you.
Hello.
I'm not able to share my screen. And I did register.
Should be able to share your screen now.
Thank you. Yep. So I will try to be brief. So my name is Roxana, and here I am representing the computing center I'm affiliated with, which is at the same time the coordinator of Polish computing infrastructure, which is called PL Grid. So a little bit about CypherNet, just to be quick, we have 4 large computing machines. Our main capabilities is the computing power, the applications aimed at a different scientific discipline. We are an autonomous within the Technological University in Krakow. And as I said, we are the coordinator of the Polish Grid and Cloud Infrastructure for Science, and also the coordinator of the National Grid Infrastructure in EGI infrastructure. We are running right now four machines: Ares, Prometheus, Athena, and Zeus, which is not listed here. Computing portals and frameworks for general public, let's call it, because they can be used by different scientific disciplines. We have also data centers and storage capabilities. Inside of CypherNet, we have different teams dealing with different R&D staff, like distributed computing environments, computing acceleration, machine learning, and software development and optimization. Our team that I'm representing is the one representing machine learning and software development, also a little bit about computing acceleration. But apart from being involved in PL Grid, we are also being involved in the delivery of one of the core components in EOSC Future, but I will try to stand next to it, the EOSC Marketplace. But what I only wanted to say, but that in addition to what we know in the scope of Polish computing infrastructure, we know also a little bit about the communities and representatives on both Polish and European lands, in both Polish and European landscape, because of the fact that we are trying to understand the user needs from the EOSC Marketplace and the whole front office perspective. That's why we know more or less about other use cases, not only the Polish one, but I will be focusing on the Polish one right now. So this is the presentation of our cool computers, but if you want to get back to it, you will have it in the slides. That first was Athena, that's the biggest one we are operating right now. This one is Ares. They're also, sorry, they're also meant for different purposes. That was the aim of setting up this different machines. Prometheus is the one that has been bought in the scope of, and this is our whole network. So Prometheus and Zeus were bought as part of a set of projects that started and finalized in operational and productional PL Grid infrastructure. And this is it, this is PL Grid. So as I mentioned, set of projects, 4 of them had to happen. So we are in the place that we are right now in Poland. The consortium is consisting of 5 partners, but at the beginning there were 6 of them. Sorry, at the beginning there were 5. Now there are 6 because the National Center for Nuclear Research has been added to the infrastructure after the last project has been shut down, has been finished. And what do we offer as part of the national infrastructure? So first of all, what we consider as infrastructural resources, so computing, storage, and cloud resources, but also universal approach towards management of affiliations of the users, monitoring and accounting for the resources used within the infrastructure, and the whole resource allocation process before the monitoring and accounting. All of this is available through the portal. This is more or less what is available for the user from the researcher from his or her home. So that as we know, the remote access to the computing resources, but before the access, what needs to be done is that the management of affiliation, the teams to have access to the resources, services to be asked for, and grants to be set up for the sake of the use of resources. This is an example of a grant that allows the user, or allocation that allows a group of users to have an access to a given group of clusters within the infrastructure. As you can see, there is this notion of grant that there is this that before having access to Marisa, sorry, but we can hear you. Before having access to the proper resources within the grant, you can have a technical grant to see whether the resources you chose, so the types of servers you chose are adequate to your way of, to the research purpose you are setting up the grant for. We have also we are asking the researchers to publish the publications and give the acknowledgements within the publications that were published due to the use of PL Grid resources. We are asking for the reports and accounting from the users, and then we are giving the reports back as an infrastructure. What you can see, it's 3 years old, but it's kind of accurate now. Here we can see how the users in Poland are using our infrastructure. So it's not surprising that the main centers are in the cities where the computing centers are being placed. But as you can see, all other major cities in Poland are also aware of the PL Grid and are using the PL Grid infrastructure. And here I wanted to quickly show the use cases. We are hosting PL Grid. So the main scientific disciplines that are cooperating within the infrastructure are the astrophysics, chemistry, and biophysics. It's due to the fact that these are the groups that were also involved in the delivery of the infrastructure itself, because when delivering the PL Grid, we were also focusing on the thematic services. And apart from the fact that we are making public the resources, the infrastructural resources themselves, we are also in our catalog, we have also the notion of thematic services that are installed on every cluster and available to the general public in Poland, so everyone can use it. Although we also have problems with the sustainability from the national perspective, because after the grants has been over and after the 5-year period of the maintenance has finished, not all of the thematic services have survived, simply because there were not people able to maintain the user support or the technical installation of the solutions and software installed within the clusters. We are also working very closely with the students, and here are the 2 use cases that the students themselves use the computing power. In this case, it was Cyphronets, but we have students using, or we are trying to engage young researchers from all over Poland and let them learn how to use computational resources, not once they enter the, let's say, the PhD stage, but also even before. So when they are deciding to become PhD doctors, then they know how to use the infrastructure and the tools available there. And this is our cooperation, some of our cooperation on the both Cyphronet and PL Grid level. And taking that into consideration, what you could possibly see in this presentation, in that from the perspective of the core services, the Polish infrastructure is running its own core services. Nevertheless, it would be very beneficial from our understanding to integrate what EOSC is acknowledging as its core services for the sake of being part of something more. When it comes to the utilization of exchange part of EOSC, well, this is tricky because, again, maybe some of you know, when it comes to infrastructures, when the researcher, especially, maybe I will also add that we are also collaborating with the research infrastructures. We have Synchrotron in Krakow, for example, that is using our resources in Cyphronet. We have, for example, Sat4NV initiative, which is processing the Copernicus data on our PL Grid clusters and then making it available for the specific purposes of Polish administration and some of Polish researcher groups. So when it comes to resources, Poland is kind of safe. We have our own resources. the well-structured research organizations or communities, where they will come to first probably will be the Polish infrastructure itself. But for example, when talking to smaller groups of researchers, they would probably be interested in EOSC resources if possible regarding the policy, because for example, for the national infrastructure, it's out there and it's available, but for now, for the Polish researchers only, or for researchers or communities affiliated with Polish research somehow. One of the use cases that was brought to me, and it's a very interesting one, is that when Polish researchers are applying for grant in Polish ministry, what they are very often asked for are computational resources. And they can do two things. They can ask for the money to set up the resources and try to operate it knowing nothing about it, or they can point someone who is already doing that and try to put these resources within the grant as the proposition that this is where the computational or storage capability will come from. And one of the use cases I was confronted with or was talking about was exactly that. So if it's possible that the research group applying for grant in Polish ministry would be at some point able to point EOSC resources to be the resources that are expected within the grant, within the research being conducted in the grant. And that's one of the use cases I think it's very interesting for us for the future being. When it comes for Polish Polish researchers' expectations regarding EOSC, as far as we know for now, definitely there will be a huge interest in reuse of the thematic services if feasible, because we know that for some communities this access is closed within the community, not for everything, but at some use cases. Definitely there will be interest, especially for the data and software available out there. But what is wanted probably the most is the knowledge and guidelines regarding the data management. Because as long as there are people involved in initiatives like EOSC or bigger European initiatives, and we know how to deal with data management and how to do it properly, how to run a repository, how to create a repository, the average researcher in Poland does not. We have barely any data stewardships in Poland. We have no data managers at all. We have probably no awareness among I don't want to see Polish ministry, but we don't have awareness enough to have money for that. So probably the good practices around that area will be something to look for. And if EOS would be pushing that notion a lot, and if the EOS would be putting a lot of emphasis about the professional delivery of the services and the resources, it would mean a lot for the researchers themselves, because it would probably make people who are giving money in Poland aware that this is in fact important. And last but not least, I think where are we heading to in the end is trying to give guidance about how to make research easier, so that the researcher in the end who is producing data has a tool somewhere that is easily operated, and the publishing of data which is fair should be out of the box somehow for this researcher. And probably the researcher shouldn't even know that the data is fair or whatever. The researcher should be able to know that sharing the data is something worth doing for the sake of the research, and that the reuse of the data shared or the software or the service delivered as a part of the project or the researcher collaboration should be something natural and easy. And I believe that's something that EOSC in the end can be meant for. And that's all from me. Hope I was chaotic.
Thank you very much, Roxana, for having shared all the challenges that you are seeing in this environment. Okay, I think we can go to the question. So let's start from the first question. So how do you make sure that the exchange include all the European relevant resources? So this question is about making sure that what we have in the exchange is representative of the European capacity and not just a sample of services or resources. Who wants to take this question? Maybe Jan, you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can only do this by making sure that the exchange is valuable enough that people recognize it as a place where they want to publish their data or their services. I mean, I think I can say what we're doing in ESCAPE, which is one of the science clusters for physics and astronomy, where we are inside ESCAPE, we have a catalog which includes all of the services and all of the resources that we have in ESCAPE. And that catalog is being onboarded into the EOS portal. So it's scalable in the sense that we don't need to do anything to push our services to the EOS catalog or the exchange catalog. It's automatic once it goes into our own catalog. So I think there are strategies like that, but you have to, I think the real point is that unless people recognize this as something of value, then they're not going to do it.
Yeah, and Roxana Evangelia, it would be good if you could reflect how you see valuable the exchange from your point of view. Roxana, you can go first.
Yes, thank you. To build on top of what Ian has said, I think that the easy question, how we make sure that the answer to the question, we don't make sure right now, because what, in my opinion, we are doing right now, we are trying to recognize the whole landscape. And as I told you, the expectations and needs will depend a lot on who you are asking, what would be valuable in EOS Exchange. So as I said, in Poland, what we are expecting is the data knowledge on data management, for example, because we're not that interested in horizontal services because we run our own, for example, depending on different scientific disciplines, they will ask for something else. So what we can do is go one use case by one and incorporate what's feasible for them, and then try to have a bigger picture. And as Ian said, has value enough for the exchange providers. So they join us, and then we can serve more and more communities and research groups that are potentially EOS or should be EOS.
Okay, Evangelia, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, it could be nice if a mapping exercise was performed in order to be able more or less to have a clear idea in each country of what is already available. And if there is no initiative or things are at a very early stage, then some advice should be there, I think, for constructing things the correct way, if I could say that, or the EOS way, just to be able to make the most of any new repositories or initiative that would really start now. So in that respect, to avoid, again, overlapping or doing repetition of the same tasks in different countries when something is already available. And as far as it concerns the different disciplines and thematic areas, I think that S3 projects could play a really key role in that, because they are in most countries that we have either as observers or even just a community with interest already expressed. The example of structural biology is really clear. And I think for other thematic areas as well, and they could recommend how these actions should take place in collaboration with different other key players. For example, we have here people that they are working like our colleagues from Athena Research Center and OpenAir. So there is, for us, it's not great need, let's say, because we know where to turn to, but other countries might not have this opportunity.
Okay, I think you raise a very good point, and this is also the purpose of these webinars that we are doing with national representatives to understand what are the needs of the countries, and indeed the research infrastructures and the ES3 are also involved in EOS future for provision of such requirements. And there is another question relating in general to the purpose of the exchange, and it's about if EOS future is also working at policy legal level to remove the barriers for transnational access to resources. And there, I believe that the answer is no, that we don't have such activities in EOS future unless someone else has a different opinion.
The answer is no, but I think the place that this should be addressed is the Eos Association, which is by definition these people. So I think that each country has to really push their delegate in the Eos Association to solve these problems.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to open to what Ian said. More than the EOSC Association, I think that this is a role for the EOSC steering board, where the country representatives are there, but definitely something for the EOSC partnership as a whole to sort out. Yes, Roxana briefly, and then Licia.
Yeah, I only wanted to say that what Ian has said also earlier, that what we should try to do, and we will try to do, is better match the legal and policy constraints. So once you are browsing the catalog, you should get hits that you have in fact access to based on the policy constraints. That's what we can do, but we cannot remove the barriers.
Yeah, good point. Licia?
So maybe a different perspective. I don't think the answer should be a straight no, as you said. So maybe EOSC future as a project is not actively providing a legal office or a policy office. However, this said, I don't know exactly what the question means with transnational national access, but the clusters are doing this. I mean, science doesn't end at the border. So if you are a researcher in Switzerland, you cannot access resources that you need for your projects if they are in Germany. This is happening all the time, and the clusters have done a lot of work on this. This happens. There is some work as needed that is done also if you look, for instance, in terms of GDPR, etc. Those are things that the services or the EOS core service have looked into that. So this aspect has been taken into account. If the answer is whether the EOS future is providing really a consultancy for others to do that, this is not in place, but services are looking into this when they offer access. Roxana doesn't offer service access to people that are all in Poland, right? So this is taken into account. So, and I probably let Ian to comment more on that.
No, I was just going to comment on what you said. I think the clusters or the research infrastructures, more specifically, have agreed the transnational access because it's for a specific purpose and they understand and trust who the people are. I think that the issue is that there's no generalization of that. So you can't just have a European-wide compute service run in one country which is open to everybody else. I think that it's more. I mean, we've solved the problem for specific use cases, but I think there's no general solution.
Yeah, and my no was coming with the fact that if I want to onboard one service or one resource in the exchange, it doesn't come with the removal of the barrier whether I can offer these resources outside my country. So in that sense, so EOS Future is not actively working on that, but as you said, that's up to the service providers at the moment. So I think then I would like to take these two other questions that are more about the terminology, clarification of terminology. So the first one is is the exchange the same as the EOSC marketplace and catalog? And there was another one for Roxana, include all resources that are or should be EOSC. What does it mean? So I would like to take these two questions at the same time.
So I would say, but maybe I'm wrong. For me, exchange is exposed by via EOSC marketplace and catalog. It's not the same, but what's in exchange is exposed there. That would be my question to that. Regarding include all resources that are or should be EOSC. Well, EOSC again, my opinion, EOSC is meant to be this infrastructure initiative that supports science in Europe. And we came up with a recognition of different types of resources. And assuming that every country is delivering some resources, it would be great that if in the end we were connected as EOSC and every country would become a part of it. So all resources that are or should be EOSC, what I mean that are already integrated within EOSC, because some of them are via the regional projects right now, or should be because if a country is running a computing infrastructure, it probably should be part of EOSC at some point. That's what I had in mind.
Anyone else wants to add anything? No. So maybe, and I think we are running out of time, I would like to take this question for Evangelia about is Instruct the research infrastructure planning to make available data in the EOSC portal or through the exchange, maybe?
Okay, at national level, yes, through the dashboard anyway, and the catalog of services, which we're hoping to connect with at EU level. I mean, with other with EOSC, other services provided through EOSC, and it's in the Instruct Eric. It's already involved through the EOSC Live. There is a project I'll put on chat here. There is a link about developing workflows for electron microscopy. So our colleagues there have already made, had the opportunity actually to show how to develop such a workflow and how to deposit data to a repository and be accessible and findable by other users.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think we need to close to give us the possibility to the participants to have a short break. So I'm just asking the speakers if you want to add any additional remark before we close the session, or if somebody in the audience has any burning question. Roxana.
Well, I wanted to say only one thing for the end. I'm not sure how it looks like in other countries, but yes, we are now talking with people who are already aware of EOSC, but in Poland, especially research infrastructures, those that are not cooperating with A-infras, they are kind of bystanders. And I believe they can have a lot of needs regarding EOSC. They just don't know even that it exists. So it's probably the next step that once we know what might be needed among those more mature, I'm not saying that they are not mature enough as research infrastructures, but they're not aware of, let's say, collaborations out there in Europe. And there are many of them. So I would also say that from Polish perspective, we do expect more communication and dissemination, just to know how to reach people and how to talk with them regarding their needs and how they can cooperate or how can they become users of EOSC.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, so then I think we should stop here.
Hello, everyone. I think we're gonna get back to it. We've had a good discussion on the horizontal and core services provided by EOSC with some national cases. And now we're going to talk about interoperability guidelines. So I'll hand it over to Paolo Manghi of Open Air to introduce the next panel.
I think it was Licia.
Yeah, I was also wondering, did we change? I was not aware.
So Licia.
Okay, Licia, if you want to go ahead.
Well, it's the same, you know, Paolo. One Italian is the same as the other one.
Don't sell yourself short.
Don't worry, no worries. Let me then see if I can share my screen, first of all. Okay, so I'm Licia Florio. I'm working for Géant, and I'm the activity leader for the work package that deals with the interoperability framework and the architecture. This talk will be on the interoperability framework, and it will be a short one, I hope. And I just want to say that the work on the interoperability is being led mostly by my colleague Michelle Williams, who is also there, so she will be happy to also chip in as needed. So I want to give just a little bit of information on the motivations that brought us where we are now. It will not be a lot of background, but it's good to know what was there already and why we are here and where we are now effectively and what we are working on. So just very briefly, I think everybody has seen the Interoperability Framework report from the EOS Executive Board Working Group Fair and Architecture. That report was trying to capture the complexity of the EOSC as a system of systems or a federated system to allow multidisciplinary science. The report was basically promoting the idea of this generic framework that can be used by all entities that participate in the EOSC, whatever the EOSC will really become at some point in time. That report had looked at different dimensions for the EOSC interoperability framework, but we felt that in the remit of this work package, our expertise was mostly technical, and therefore we agreed to focus mostly on the technical aspects, which also include some policy-related aspects that are needed to allow the technology to work properly and in a compliant manner. So what did we do? What is this EOSC interoperability framework? So as I already said, EOSC is a federated system of systems. It's a complex ecosystem. So you have heard from Ian about the clusters that are there. There is already a lot of work that has happened. There are infrastructures out there that offer service at large. And now when we try to bring all this together, whilst everything sounds great on paper, there are some challenges. And if you are in a cluster, you have experienced some of these challenges already. Now think about that 5 times big and you see where we are now. We also know that the adoption of standards is not sufficient to ensure interoperability. For different reasons. Some standards are not well defined, and that's why sometimes there are profiles for some of the standards. Not all services use the same standards. I mean, it's a very diverse ecosystem, and we don't want to be prescriptive. We want to leverage on whatever is there. We want to start from where we are now. And that's why we came to the conclusion that we need to have a way to bring all this together without limiting freedom and without destroying existing efforts that have been made there. So we came with this concept of guidelines, and trust me, there has been a long discussion on the name for this, because a guideline is really meant to be an inclusive term for a profile, an API, specification. So basically it's a catch-all word for lack of any better words. And there were also English people and they couldn't come up with anything better. So we decided to call this guideline. And the aim of this guideline is to really facilitate the interoperability to start with the Eos core, which is something that we can control within the project because it's a limited number of services there, but also to bring in existing guidelines, best practice and standards that have been deployed and within communities that are out there and that are working and that can be useful for others. And we wanted to define really a process to make sure that we could manage everything in a transparent way. Basically, what we wanted to make sure is there was a framework that could outlive the EOSC Life project span, and that could be set as a reference point to add new elements to it. Everybody could claim that they are doing something for the EOSC, and everybody will be in fact in their rights. However, not everything is an EOSC guideline, EOSC interoperability guidelines at large. And we wanted to be sure that there was a format so that things could be at least recognized as such, that whoever was going to go through these guidelines wouldn't get completely lost. but the time will tell us if we will succeed with that. Who is the beneficiary of this? Well, first of all, let's be very clear. When we talk about users, we are not talking about the end user that is out there, that is looking for specific things. We are targeting to start with providers, operating resources and facilities, catalogs, etc., that are going to adopt cautiously and work on these things. We start with the governance. This took a fairly long amount of time, and this because we wanted to interact. We wanted to come with something that people would feel that they could have a saying into that, even if the saying is, this is so abstract, you cannot write deliverables. All good, we agree on that. We apologize for the content to be a bit abstract, but we wanted to make sure that everybody knew what the complexity was there. We took inspiration from existing community bodies. When I say existing community bodies, I'm not thinking about ITF, although that was also considered. We wanted to have something simple. Bodies that can be managed by a limited number of people in a flexible way. And the governance that we put in place tries to reflect that. There was a consultation on the EOSC interoperability framework, on the framework, not on the content and on the guidelines. So that probably also reflected some of the comments that felt a bit abstract. We wanted to make sure that the process was clear, that people would understand what does it mean to promote things via the EOSC interoperability framework. The webinar is online recorded. If you are interested, you can see that. Now, once we have defined the box, the jar, we have to put the candies into the jar. How do we do that? So there is work ongoing on the content, and this happened in parallel. We started with EOS core services. As I said, this is a limited set of services. There is the help desk, the accounting, the monitoring, and another couple of services that are there. So we could really have control for that. We do know how the EOS core services are working at this point in time, so we could define pretty specific guidelines how somebody can use these core services. Some of them are accessible as a service. Some others provide just basically an interface, and the expectation is that information is transferred to the core service in a very specific manner. But this is only the part that is controllable in a way, and because it's very small, and this was done within the EOSC Future and WP3, the work package that is in charge of this. But there is work that is, we really need the community, because as you know, 5 services are not really enough. That there is much more out there, and there are community guidelines, best practices that are developed by the clusters, by the communities, and we want to really promote this as EOSC interoperability framework. We want to ask the communities to come forward, use the process, submit the framework, put that in the right format so that the framework can be picked up by the EOSC interoperability framework and then promoted as EOSC interoperability framework. We have also identified some working groups that are working on specific technical aspects on which we thought there wasn't a lot existing at this point in time, particularly when it comes to cross interoperability use cases. And we expect these working groups to come forward with some interoperability guidelines. The working groups are supported by the EOSC Future, but they are open to anybody, although we cannot fund everybody that participate there, but they are certainly, people are welcome if they have the time. Just want to say a little bit more about the interoperability to be sure that things, at least that what we have in mind makes sense for everybody. If you look at EOSC, basically what you see here is really this very colorful and maybe heterogeneous environment with different providers, communities, researchers. And as you can see, these blocks, this piece of the puzzles, in many cases have different connectors. Some of them are the same because they happen to come out in the same way. Some others are not. We are not asking for those connectors to be changed because these pieces are working into another puzzle box and they should continue like that. We are providing an additional space, an additional puzzle that can connect to that and allow, therefore, for the interoperability. Basically, this is what we are trying to aim. I mean, you will have the slide, so you can go a little bit through that. But, and those guidelines are really meant to, or APIs or specification are really meant to facilitate this interoperation and to eventually allow this concept, this idea of the composability, which is not happening today yet, not at that scale. It will happen. I mean, it's the ultimate goal, because first we need to lay down the foundations for that. So just to give maybe a little bit of an example, for instance, you can see here an example of a service. This is a service, data transfer service, just for the sake of the argument. This service is onboarding to the EOSC. Maybe this service is already part of a research collaboration. So this research collaboration, for instance, is onboarding the service through the catalog, for instance. So via this catalog, once the service is onboarded, in addition to explaining what the service is and what the service does, there will be also a support to explain which interoperability guidelines the service supports, so that others looking for that service, they know already what do they need to interoperate with that service. And for instance, we put here a set of an example again. All these interoperability guidelines will be collected into a registry. So eventually people should be able to go through the registry, look for a guidelines and see which set of services communities are compliant, communities, research collaboration are compliant with those guidelines. As another example, for instance, if we look at the AI, which is probably something that is a bit more, well, I don't know whether mature, but there has been a lot of interest in the past months. If you look at this service, for instance, the service is part of a research collaboration. This research collaboration will have probably an infrastructure proxy. As you know, all these community proxies, they follow the ARC blueprint specifications and guidelines. So this is then in turn connected to the EOSC AI Federation. What does it mean? That users coming from, for instance, another research infrastructure that is also connected to the EOSC AI Federation and which is also supporting the ARC blueprint guideline will be able seamlessly to access the service in the same manner as they access the service in their own community. So just very briefly on the governance, I said we define this governance. We identify two bodies, the EOSC Interoperability Advisory Board and the EOSC Interoperability Area Chairs. For the time being, so what we want, first of all, what we wanted to do with these bodies was to decouple a little bit the responsibility. The interoperability area chairs are those that really are performing the assessment of the guidelines to make sure that all the information are there, that everything is as indicated in the templates that has been defined. And the advisory board, as really more an advisory, is really the board that makes sure that everything is in order and that endorses the guidelines. So to keep things simple for the time being, we try to use the existing bodies that we had in place, the task leads for the area chairs and the advisory board for the, and the EOSC future coordination board for the advisory board. But the plan is going forward to appoint also new people, and Michelle has already started to get in touch with some people about that. What are the current activities that we are working on? Well, we want to populate the EOSC interoperability framework. We are starting with EOSC core interoperability guidelines. We are moving them all in the same template. We are also trying to test the processes, submitting that, publishing the guidelines, etc. And we need to engage the clusters really to promote their own guidelines as EOSC interoperability guidelines. I mentioned the registry briefly. I don't want to go into details. We worked out the specification for the registry, and work is ongoing to have this registry. And slowly, as the guidelines are approved, we want to move the information on the registry so people can find the guidelines there as well. And we are going to publish those guidelines as appropriate also on Zenodo, by the way. But we do realize that we need to have really a proper communication campaign. We need to have tools to provide updates and to make sure that things are clear. Already in the discussion before showed that people are confused. There are lots of terms. People have maybe different expectations, different views. So we need really to work together to provide more feedback and to provide really showcase use cases, how this guideline works for this or for that. So this is all work in progress. And then in summary, just I want to be clear that people don't feel as if we are trying to rebuild the wheel, reinvent the wheel. This is not the idea. We are not gonna go for new ISO style certification models. Absolutely not. This is not our intention, at least not at this point in time. We do not want to replace existing community guidelines that work in their own rights and in their own community very well. On the contrary, we would like for this to be promoted so other communities are first aware what is needed to interact with a certain community, or maybe they can also get the inspiration and use these guidelines for themselves. And we want really to ensure that when community data sources are onboarded into EOSC, the EOSC interoperability framework also allows to explicitly onboard all the related aspects of such data source, including implicit or explicit guidelines that will be part of the EOSC interoperability guidelines. And this will allow us basically to fill in some of the gaps that are there. And this is all I have to say. So I'll stop share so I can also see you, and I'm happy to get any questions. And I hope I have not confused you either.
Thank you. Paolo, I'm not sure if you want to follow up and
Yes, no, I think,
introduce the next.
yeah, no, I think we can now continue with the session. Thank you, Licia. This was really exhaustive, I think. So we have now two presentations, which will tell us about the national perspective on guidelines in general on interoperability issues and challenges at the national level when these regard open science services and ecosystems in general. So the first one is from Alec Vodopivic, if I'm not mistaken in the way it should be pronounced.
It's Alan, yes, it's
okay.
fine, thanks.
From Institute Rude Boskovic, but also an open air node. So please go ahead, the floor is yours.
So you see presentation, do you see?
Yes, we do.
Okay, thank you very much. So yeah, I will give you a brief presentation about the interoperability of parts of Croatian infrastructure with the open air and some of the activities in the sense of the EOSC and other infrastructural projects in Croatia. So maybe this ongoing work on the EOSC guidelines will get some ideas from it. So currently, as you know, the Open Air Explorer, the portal of all the information harvested from the EU publications ecosystem is online, and on that portal we have 300 data sources tagged Croatia. So Croatian data sources. These are repositories and aggregators of the scientific research results. So in Croatia, we started this first implementations of open air guidelines and comply with the open air somewhere in 2013. And with institutional repositories based on e-prints and some other repositories also were made compliant. But the majority of the resources was added later when we started with the implementation of compliance of the larger aggregators. So the first was the central portal of Croatian scientific journals, Hrčak, and today it offers hosting for 526 open access journals, and there are over 250,000 full text articles, and all authors, almost all authors, have the ORC IDs in that system. And this is also, as one central platform, is compliant with the OpenAIRE, and everything is harvested in OpenAIRE. Also, one good example that we can share is the DABAR. This is the National Institutional Repository Hosting Platform. It's based on Islandora, and in the beginning of this open access era, we find out that many institutions doesn't have proper IT support, and it would be impossible for them to implement their own repositories and to share the results in that way. So this national hosting platform was developed and implemented. And also we can see that almost 160 repositories are compliant with version 4 of OpenAIRE guidelines for literature and data. So this example of one centralized infrastructure that can easily implement the solutions for a large number of repositories. And also we have this Croatian Scientific Bibliography project, which is also compliant, and we are sharing the results, the scientific results of scientific research with the OpenAIRE and with the global community. One other example of this interoperability is the exchange of projects, research projects information. So the idea was to connect the project information with the publications that are results of activities in that project. So we are maintaining from 2016 one national project, scientific project database that is consisting of records from the OpenAIRE. So we are importing the project records of the projects that Croatian institutions are participating in, and also we are using the information of Croatian Science Foundation. So the national projects are also in that database, and as a benefit from that, we are also using this database as projects information provider for the OpenAIRE. So our Croatian national projects are getting harvested from the OpenAIRE site, and the OpenAIRE portal and whole ecosystem is enabled to use this information for the graph and for other analysis. Through the APIs, of course, this information is available for other portals, web services, repositories, and other aggregators. And it has to be said that also besides this importing of projects and automatic exchange, there is also administration. There's also manual input and the administration of all the records that are in the database. So there is also the added value for all of this. So when we talk about the EOSC in Croatia, there is a project, National Initiative for Open Science in Europe. The Registry Institute is there for supporting as a node and supporting the repositories onboarding, but we are also doing some support for thematic services. And the other project worth mentioning is the development and implementation of Croatian research information system, and I will elaborate this further. So this NIFORS Europe has a few goals. The first is this support for the development and inclusion of the national open science initiatives in 15 member states. And in Croatia, there is an initiative for the Croatian Open Science Cloud, which is promoting the EOSC open science, and we are drafting some recommendations for the laws and policies that should be implemented regarding the open science. Also, there are some goals in spreading the EOSC and FAIR principles in the community. So we are doing workshop and training and providing the technical and policy support in onboarding of the existing services and service providers. So this is the part where we support the existing services in complying with the current requirements of the EOSC portal. In the project, we have some middle step between those specific services and the EOSC, and this is some kind of registry of services, NIFOS catalog. There is a link. So we there have around 100 services. These are generic services, thematic services, and repositories that are in some of them are already onboarded on EOSC, and the majority is in the phase of getting the all requirements for that.
Alan, sorry,
yeah. Yeah.
Can close because you've burned your 15 minutes. So if you can.
Sorry?
If you can conclude, because I think we only have another presentation in 15 minutes to go. So.
But I had only 5, no?
Sorry, I thought you had 15 minutes each for the presentations, but you're 20 now. So if you can please.
Okay.
This is what I learned from the agenda, if I'm not mistaken, Alex. But please, thank you.
Okay. So, yeah, well, I can conclude. So regarding yeah, regarding the EOSC, I think, and the guidelines, I think what we can later discuss and maybe think about is the evaluation and assessment of the usage of services and some kind of quality of assurance. So evaluating the quality of those services in EOSC. Sharing those evaluation results, because it's not enough for enabling open science to incentivize and reward the scientists, but also the institutions and service providers to incentivize them and to finance them based on the quality and the usage of those services. So, okay, thanks.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, but we really need to stick with the agenda and the schedule. So the second speaker is Menno Shears from SURF. So Menno, if you can please try to stick to the time you were given, so maybe we have time for 1 or 2 questions. Thank you.
Yes, I will try to do it in 10 minutes, so let's go. Well, let's see. So I'm Menno Shears. I've been working for 15 years at a university in Amsterdam until April this year. And now I work as a lead architect at the national organization SURF. And the universities in the Netherlands, they ask for a more coherent and future-proof national landscape. And my story might have a somewhat bigger scope. So, well, at the university, I started together with the other universities to develop HOSA. And HOSA is the national framework for the future sector facilities for research and education. And HOSA is not a technical architecture, but it's more a high-level conceptual architecture, or a destination plan for research and education. And both architectures for research and education were ready in 2021. So, and at this moment, the one for education has already been funded with a huge subsidy of 500 million euros to implement it. And for research, we're still looking for funding, etc., to implement it. And in my opinion, we should develop all digital services for research and education in such a way that they can be available both within a national and international environment, and that they can also be available in research or education domain. And we need an overarching architecture to organize this interoperability. Okay, next slide. But how do you get a coherent landscape for scientists, for teachers, for civilians, companies, and the rest of society? Interoperability starts with using shared models. And central in our architecture for education and research is the model of a marketplaces. And this is for 2 reasons. So we see everywhere the need for broad collaboration within the sector of research and sector for education. And national facilities should support this collaboration on all levels. And the second one is that tech giants also use this business model of marketplaces to get dominant positions within in the different sectors, also in education and research. And we don't want to give our sectors away to these tech giants. So we expect marketplaces to be everywhere in future in our sector, and we want them to be ours. So here at the screen, you can see the marketplaces we defined. And if you go to the next one, then you can see that we have marketplaces in future for exchanging data, services, content. And you can see that, or you know that education and research, that we have several touch points. And how can we develop a coherent landscape so we can organize these touch points between, for example, exchanging of learning material, and research data management, or within the digital learning environment and the virtual research environment. So there are all kind of connections there. So if you go to the next slide, then under all these marketplaces, we developed a common model. And on the screen, you can see this common model that forms the base of all the marketplaces I just showed. And also in this model, you can recognize something like a core with several services in it. And the model also on the upper side uses a multi-channel approach to support different target groups, which sometimes be at a national level, sometimes be on a regional level, and sometimes be international level. And on the underside, you see several kinds of participants who might offer services within the marketplace. And the basic idea of HOSA is that you can start marketplaces on all kinds of levels, but that the underlying structure doesn't change. So if you go to the next one, smart cities, for example, for exchanging data between companies and universities, might use the same underlying structure as a national open science portal, or as a national medical research data exchange portal. So the underlying structure can be the same. If you go to the next slide, with making this architecture, we were a little bit in front of the interoperability framework of Eos. So yeah, we decided to compare. And during defining our architecture, we also had a look, of course, at European initiatives like Eos. And Eos was also one of the examples that confirmed for us the idea of marketplaces, that this is a good idea. And well, last year Eos developed this interoperability framework, and we decided to investigate how well the high-level architectures of Eos and HOSA, how they align. And this has been done by Mark van der Zande, who is also here today. And interoperability consists of different levels of interoperability. So we had a look at the goals, principles, process, and application architecture. And we concluded that HOSA and Eos, that they match very well. So that for the interoperability in future, this is really positive news for us. Well, if you go to the next one, and if you want to make some next steps, then we have several challenges. For example, can we develop a common core for the national marketplaces for research and education as well? Also, like Eos did on the international level for research. And can we define or build marketplace components that can be used on a national, but maybe on an international level as well, so that parts which we use on a national level might be used in EOSC or in the international European education initiative? Or can we define digital services that are usable on national level within the boundaries of HOSA and the international level of EOSC by default? And using the EOS guidelines on a national level might make this possible for us in a near future. So concluding, I think that high-level architectures can help us to define services that are usable within our country, but also within Europe. And I think that our society and our scientists will benefit on long term for having such an overarching approach with each other. So this is my story. I hope it was within 10 minutes.
Yes, it was. Thank you, Manu. It was also extremely interesting, proactive also with respect to the actions that we are trying to take with the EOSC, and we really hope this kind of actions will become more and more common. So thank you. So we have a few minutes to ask and reply some questions. I see there's That's the order of the questions. Okay, from top to down. Okay, so I see that we have many questions about the term guideline in general, and the fact that guidelines can be interpreted as recommendations more than required things, if I can summarize this. So probably these are for Licia, and they're more generic than for our speakers.
Actually, Paolo, maybe we can pick this together. So there are a couple of aspects here. I can sympathize with the need of people to get something prescriptive, and the guideline as such can be very technical, can be a set of well-defined technical requirements. However, we as a project cannot enforce that. And the reason being is that people will adopt the guidelines when they have a need and they see that the guidelines helps them to address this need. We could call the guidelines in another way, but I mean, I think OpenAir has also experience with calling similar things guidelines. I don't think it's the name as much here, the point, the problem. For the EOS core, we are more prescriptive because there will be only a few a couple of ways in which you can interoperate with EOS core. For the others, particularly when it comes to interoperability between communities, there is no way we can be prescriptive about that. And I mean, equally, the ITF doesn't impose standards. They even let the freedom to those that implement the standards to come with different implementations. I know this will be a longer route to take, but I think this is the best route in my view. Yeah, and I'm happy to be contradicted and to have a discussion on it.
If I can complement what you just said. So on the EOS core, the idea is to, again, follow the path of having prescriptive guidelines in order to collaborate, to interact and integrate with the EOS, but also to be open towards the best effort and approach. So the idea, again, apologies for the buzzword, is the system of systems approach. So we're trying to use standards where these exist, or to include standards, so putting the effort on the ability of the EOS platform to integrate with external communities rather than vice versa, based on a convenience that both communities and the EOS have. Of course, this is an effort that is to be traded with the community themselves. On the EOS exchange, as Licia said, what is extremely important, I think, is that these guidelines that communities are using surface centrally at the level of the EOS, especially when these are used to perform interoperability effort at the local level, maybe between different infrastructures, right? Because of the need they had to do it. Thanks to this, we can tag the resources, we can understand who and how is using which kind of guidelines, and therefore play more policy level activities and understand if we can converge towards one of the standards or if there are any others that can map onto the standards and so on. The thing today is that all this is hidden within the communities. And thanks to the EOS, this should surface and maybe, let's say, more manageable. Then we have questions and response to the comments above. How to align well-embedded standards across multiple mature communities. And again, I think this is what Licia said before. This should not happen by definition. Should happen only if it makes sense. And any effort in that direction, of course, should be welcomed also by other communities that have similar issues and may find in the solutions found out there their own solutions. And they can only learn about this thanks to the fact that we have an EOS interoperability framework today that makes this visible, tangible. For Menno, there's a question for you. Can you give the reference to HOSA? So if you can share it maybe in the chat, if there is a website or a framework.
Yes, I can share a website in the chat, but it's only available at this moment in Dutch. So we are translating the documents. We already have translated the one for education, and The one for research is in progress. So I can already, if you want, send me an email. I can send the domain architecture for education. And then you will know how it works for research as well, I think. And then I can send afterwards also the one for research.
Great, thank you. And then since it seems that most of the questions are coming from one person alone, if she would like to talk and say and maybe answer to what Licia and I try to explain, if there is anything that is not clear. Or you can write another question as a follow-up. Okay, thank you for your response, but respectfully, I foresee a huge problem with this approach. Well, yes, we understand. Of course, this is not certainty, so it's a try. The only option that we had would be to impose standards to all the communities, which would never work, right? And it would not make sense, frankly, because as somebody has written here, mature communities in many cases are very mature. They have their own standards, their own practices, and they will not get out of those because of imposition. It would be counterproductive, frankly, from the Commission itself. So the idea here is to fill the gap where there is a gap, okay, and where we can help in that direction. And sorry, I read your message, and there are always cases where this is possible. Never achieving to, but the guidelines.
Paolo, sorry, maybe if there are representative of clusters here, maybe they can also react to this, because I mean, so far we are not under the impression that by imposition we will foster collaboration. On the contrary.
I see.
I don't know what that means.
Oops.
If you like.
Sorry, Siri came up. I see this never achieving interoperability without a set of, I think, is technical requirements, right? But again, as Licia said, the guidelines are extremely technical. So they can get into very specific instructions on how to implement and what should be implemented, which are the protocols, the formats, and so on. So they're not general indications, okay? So again, we call in the past open air guidelines, and we have thousands of repositories, as Alan was explaining, that are compliant to those. And this is the case in many other contexts. So they imply technical requirements. They're called guidelines because typically they are a set of standards and with instructions on how to use such standards. So we didn't know how to call this container, but they are technical. Is there anything left, Licia, without an answer?
No, but maybe we can have another set of events where we show, for instance, what we have done for the core, really going through some guidelines, get some communities that have adopted those guidelines, explain how they did, and start from that. If people find this useful, I don't think we can add anything more. So there is a question about how prescriptive should the guideline be. So the point is that, for instance, for the core, Paul and I are saying we are a bit more prescriptive because those are services in the core, and therefore there will be a limited set of possibilities to interact with them, and either people follow those guidelines or they will not be able to do that. I'm not saying that we will not be able to find in the exchange some other services where this will be the case, but this is something that it cannot come top down. This is the problem that we see. We need to work with the communities and come with these concrete examples and provide the guidelines. And even so, there is no way that we can force, for instance, somebody from EOSC Life to adopt some specific guideline because they want to work with another community. It's up to them if they see a value to interoperate with another community or to access a data set or what have you, to follow those specifications rather than reinventing the wheel.
Thank you very much, Licia, for adding that, and Paolo. I think we can take some of these questions offline. We're going to export all of the questions and we can respond to them in further depth if you like. And with that, I think maybe we'll just close up today's session, unless anyone wants to add anything. Any last words? But thank you so much for your time. We will be reconvening tomorrow at 10 o'clock again for another series of sessions, again, exploring some of these topics more in depth and getting more national perspectives. You can use the same Zoom account details that you used to access this event. And the Slido will also be up for that as well. So we look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.